Alright, hello everyone, today I'm going to be covering 3 different common calculation mistakes I see many different players make, and I'm going to be showing 3 of my own games to really illustrate how these mistakes may look in practice. Without further ado, let's get right into it. So the first mistake we're going to be looking at today is what I'd call not doing this process of falsification. And now what is falsification? Well, this is what many players don't do when they calculate actually. What most players will do is they'll calculate some lines, they'll look at lines where their idea will work, but they'll never really try to seek out an idea for their opponent that might refute their whole concept. And that's exactly what I did in this game here, where my opponent here in this position played rook c3, attacking my bishop here, and of course I saw this, I decided to play, I was starting to calculate, at least in this position, this idea queen e2, which I did end up playing, and the whole idea was that, okay, if white takes it, I simply take back, and I make an exchange of queens, my position should be pretty safe. Say in this position, if white plays g takes h5, bishop takes h5, they can put a rook on g3, but I can just simply play g6, and I don't really have to be concerned about any attack on the g file, my position is pretty safe here. But something I did have to be more concerned about was this potential idea in white's position to play queen f4, attacking my bishop now with 2 attackers on this bishop. However, I did calculate that maybe I could simply play queen takes f2 in that position, counter-attacking the white rook, forcing that rook to move away maybe to a school like c1, that's specifically what I was calculating naturally. And then at the end of that variation, however, it isn't completely clear how I defend my bishop on f3. In fact, it's not really possible, but there was this counter-attacking idea I saw. I'll put this on the board actually after queen f4 here, queen takes f2, rook c1, that I could play rook c1, and now this rook on c3 is kind of overloaded, trying to defend this rook on c1 and also attack this bishop on f3. And now for example, if white tried to play a move like rook takes f3, this would simply lose to rook takes c1 check, and queen takes, and black is simply an exchange up. But somewhere in this whole variation, I actually missed a very strong resource for my opponent. So coming back to this position here, if you'd like to try and find what that is, I highly suggest you do so. But that being said, it all came down to once again the fact that I didn't really falsify this whole variation and really check to see what my opponent's strongest ideas may be, which meant that further down this line after queen e2, queen f4, queen takes f2, I only considered one move for my opponent's rook here, which was to move the rook to c1. But instead what I didn't consider, well I did consider it, but only after I arrived in this position, actually after queen f4, where I realized that after queen takes f2 here, my opponent doesn't have to put the rook on c1, it can actually go to b1. And now, once again, I can't really protect my bishop on f3. This whole kind of idea hinged on the fact that I would have this rook e1 resource, and this would tactically save me. But in this position, it doesn't do that, because after rook e1 now, rook takes f3, it doesn't quite work the same. If rook takes b1 check, king takes b1, the king can escape, there's no sort of back rank mate. Or if in this position after rook takes f3 I try queen g1, this doesn't quite work either because, well, not because of rook takes e1 when I would be mating them on the back rank, but rather rook f1, if black takes this rook they will recapture, and if we take this rook they will also recapture, or recapture with the king, both moves are fine. So that led me to realize, coming back to this position here, oh crap, I've kind of screwed up, and if I saw this in advance, I probably would have avoided this whole variation. Although it did turn out I have some resources to save myself in this position, such as h takes g4 here, and I can even win this pawn, which to me looked incredibly risky opening up the h and g files, but the critical idea for now is that white actually cannot take this bishop because of back rank issues once again. For example, if rook takes g4, simply queen takes g4, and now after queen takes g4, rook e1, and that's going to be mate very soon. However, I didn't see any of this in the game, and I quickly collapsed after realizing my main idea wouldn't work, and I made a very big blunder here with bishop e4, hoping that if g takes h5, queen takes h5 would be possible, but I completely missed my opponent's resource here, rook e3, and now after queen c2, g takes h5, and now that my queen cannot recapture on h5 here, my king is in some big trouble with all these pieces attacking my king on the g file. So this is our next example here from a game I played last year, actually against a much lower rated player, and this mistake is stopping a variation too early, when if you just calculated one move deeper in a variation, you would be able to make a whole line work. And this mistake, as we'll see in this game, is very common when lower rated players play against higher rated players, and they tend to trust that higher rated player too much, which is exactly what happened here with my opponent not playing into this whole knight takes c5 line, thinking that after, sorry by the way, I played king h1 the game with the idea being that queen takes c5 would now run to queen takes g7 mate, but now there's this knight takes c5 idea, which looks like it just loses to bishop b4, with this pin on the queen here. But as some of you may have seen already, black can actually play this move knight b3, counter-attacking the queen here, also attacking the rook, and now if we simply take the queen, black takes our queen and there's been a queen exchange, but black isn't down any material. In fact, white's down a pawn, this e2 pawn is hanging, the bishop's hanging, bishop a6 may be coming. White doesn't exactly have the most fun position in the world. Which is why maybe in this position after knight b3, white should consider queen c3, and after something like queen f7 perhaps here, we have to move the rook now which is hanging, so maybe rook c d1. But after a move like bishop a6 attacking this pawn, once again black is very active, and if you compare this knight on b3 to what it was doing on d7, I'd say it's a lot more active here, and in general black doesn't really have a whole lot to worry about. But again, because my opponent was much lower rated, and once again, I really want to stress this, they just kind of trusted me too much. This is a very kind of psychological thing. It just shows that there's a lot of psychology involved in chess, despite what Bobby Fischer may have said. And it's these kind of factors that can actually have a pretty big impact on the result of the game sometimes. So what my opponent did in the game was they played queen f6, offering some sort of queen exchange. And later down the line, I ended up winning the game, but it was a bit messy, I have to admit. So this is our final game today. This one was played against an international master a couple years ago, and in this position here, the big mistake that I made was actually not that I didn't calculate one move deep enough or that I didn't do falsification. It was just that I was actually calculating at all in this position, when this sort of position is much more strategic in nature and you should be making your decisions a lot quicker and upon more positional grounds. Sure, like maybe it's okay to calculate one or two moves deep, but it's something which you shouldn't really be spending too much time on. You just need to really trust your intuition. But that's exactly what I didn't do here. I started spending all this time trying to calculate these complicated variations, and then I end up just playing this move queen c7, moving the queen aside to try and support this e5 break and just control that square in general, which is a move that I spent 10 minutes on. By the way, this was a classical game, so it's not a blitz game where if you spend 10 minutes on a single move, you're just going to lose on time. You have the time to kind of spend 10 minutes on certain moves, but not a decision like this, which is a lot more positional in nature, and you don't really need to calculate any concrete variations. And once again, I made the same mistake a few moves later after c takes d5, knight takes d5 here, and after rook c1 here. In this position, I once again spent another 8 moves in this position, when I should just kind of be trusting my intuition, just playing this e5 move, which is kind of what my whole idea was behind queen c7, but instead I delayed that with queen b8, getting my queen off the c file, which is somewhat logical. But once again, I didn't need to spend 8 minutes on that move. I could have made that move in 1 or 2 minutes. And although it may not seem like a big deal, this kind of thing can actually have a big impact later on in the game when you actually do need to make some important decisions. As we're going to see in a few moves, I already was starting to get in some trouble here with knight h4, my opponent really exploiting the weaknesses on the light squares I have just created by playing f6 and e5. Not that those are necessarily bad moves, just you need to be careful about what you do from there on. And I wasn't really, as after bishop e4 g6 here, queen f3, and I was already facing some troubles here with this queen attacking the f6 pawn, the d5 knight, and after knight c7 takes, and e4 here, I found that I was dropping the f6 pawn. So after knight c7, queen takes f6 here, the computer kind of claimed that black should be able to get some compensation somehow, but it was a very difficult position to play and I did end up losing. And once again, I would attribute this a lot to the fact that back in this position, I just spent too much time in a position where I shouldn't have been calculating, but rather in this sort of position here, where my opponent's really starting to pose some concrete problems to me. Now is the kind of moment when I should really be starting to kind of calculate a bit maybe. Alright, but with that being said, I hope you guys found this useful and that you can kind of use these insights to improve your own calculation in your own game to make some brain progress or whatever your goals are. With that being said, if you liked the video, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more content like this if you enjoyed it, and leave a comment down below if you have any suggestions or any content you'd like to see from me in the future. But anyways, until next time, I'll see you.